Hi there, and welcome to Legacy Builders. I am your host, Matt Herriman. I'm so excited to dive into the stories of leadership, community building, and the legacies of individuals that they are creating across various sectors, with the goal of inspiring you, the listeners, by highlighting the power of community and others' stories. Let's get started. Well, I am super excited to introduce you guys to my friend here, Craig Tindall, who served our city in a few different capacities over the past,
couple different
10
roles.
years ish.
Yeah.
Originally came to Murfreesboro, in 2015?
October 2015, came out from Phoenix, Arizona.
To be our city attorney, and then moved into the role of city manager sometime in mid-June?
June of 18.
18.
Yeah.
And now serves our city in role as special counsel, and we can dive into kind of what that looks like exactly. And I know it's kind of tied to some specific projects, so to speak. So just a personal note, Craig and my connection to Craig really, I guess, was through real estate. And originally, before we realized, hey, we think a lot alike and share a lot of the same values. But
exactly.
I've told some folks a story, but I just remember back early 22, I was actually helping a couple of different folks in the charter school space look for land, buildings, anything that would work for them to get a school started. And it had some communications with, planning staff. And then I just remember thinking one day, I should probably go sit down with this guy who's the city manager. So just kind of cold reached out to you essentially, and just kind of shared a little bit about who I was and background and what I was looking for. And I just remember preparing to come sit down with you at City Hall. And, we can talk about the politics of charter schools in a whole nother episode. But and from my vantage point, I was not really knowing you that well. I was thinking, all right, I've got to have like all of my charter school talking points ready. And I was also helping Hillsdale College, who was entering the market, and it's like needing those separate set of talking points.
I felt a little apprehension as you came in to see me. But.
And so I think within like 5 minutes of us sitting in the conference room, you mentioned, well, both of my boys went through charter schools in Phoenix, and I've been getting the imprimis from Hillsdale for how many years. And I was like, all right, well, you just saved us like 45 minutes.
Let's cut to the chase.
We just ended up in your office looking at the big screen of different properties around town.
Where can we find some land?
And really from there, just really grown to just have a tremendous amount of respect for you.
Well, I appreciate that.
How you conduct yourself. As I mentioned, we really have become friends in a lot of ways, just because of the shared values, our faith, and just some of the things that really kind of bond people in different ways. And so thank you for your service to the city of Murfreesboro. You really, those 5 years, the last 5 years, because you just left that role, arguably some of the fastest growing times in our city's history, and you, along with the mayor, Shane McFarland, and the council, just really shepherd us through those times and have set us up for tremendous success. So thank you for your service.
And a lot of staff members, I don't want to forget.
A
lot of the staff members too. They do a lot of the heavy work. A city manager, the buck stops with them. Obviously, they're the CEO, for lack of a better term, of the organization. But I always remind people the city manager's role is really to make sure that the right people are in the right place and they have the resources they need to do, because there's a lot of people there that really know what they're doing.
Right.
And you don't want to impede that in any respect. I'm not an engineer. You asked me to build a road, I would turn to someone who knows how to build a road.
Right.
Parks and Rec department. There's people that come up with ideas that who would have known? I wouldn't have known. My background just doesn't lend itself to all that.
Sure.
So there is a tremendous amount of really good staff members that make the city run every day, and a lot of them you don't see, you don't recognize. Of course, there's our public safety, first responders that are extremely important.
Absolutely.
In any community. But there are people who, like I said, Parks Department, there's a myriad of departments that sometimes Streets Department, solid waste that people don't think about all the time.
Yeah.
Until they need them.
That's right. Until they don't show up to
pick
up their trash.
Or there's a pothole out in front that they need to have filled. And then those guys do a tremendous amount of work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, obviously, this is the Legacy Builders podcast. And so one of the things that we ask every one of our guests is, when you think about the word legacy, what does it mean to you specifically, and how has that idea of legacy shaped the way that you have approached life and also your work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I appreciate you giving me the heads up on it. let me have a little running start at it. But of course, legacy is something that we leave to others, future generations. That's what legacy really means. But to me, the important thing, and what I tried to stress to others a lot, is too often we're caught up with legacy being a large contribution or something big. But the butterfly effect, a butterfly's wings flap, and then on the other side of the world, it may result in a hurricane because of that one small change that was made.
Yeah,
and so I think it's important for people to realize that legacy, positive or negative, because you can have positive and negative legacy, that it's not always something really obvious, something large, something that everybody knows and sees and recognizes, but sometimes it's the small thing that you do for somebody else. A small contribution you make, here or there, that adds a lot and is a significant contribution as things move forward. And I think that's important to realize from a legacy standpoint. And I've tried to convey that is every job's important, particularly when you're in public service. If your job's not important enough for the small things to be done right, you probably shouldn't be. There shouldn't be that job. That job should go away. Someone else can take that up, because it's the public's money, and we need to be responsible for that at all times. So do every bit of your job, even the smallest things that you think aren't that meaningful, because they do add up to something meaningful.
Yeah. I love the butterfly effect example.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, a little chaos theory this morning to start things off, but it is true, and I've seen it over and over again that somebody will say something, and then it could be months later. It's like somebody will remember that, and it'll make a difference.
I'm curious, when you think about legacy and your tenure as city manager, when you kind of reflect on that, what do you see that legacy being?
Well, when I was hired in retirement of our previous city attorney, and that's when they went out to search and hire. And I think at that time, council had recognized the city had grown substantially in a very short period of time, and growth changes municipal organizations. How they serve other people really is altered by the amount of people that they have to serve. Right. There's a lot of aspects to that, but that's absolutely true. So I think there was a lot of recognition that there were things that needed to be changed organizationally within the city, to make sure that they were in a good position going forward, to be able to serve what was well recognized as a continuing and resulted in a continuing growing population. So, so I came in sort of with the mandate of let's make things. The city I came from was a fast growing city in a fast growing area. We had done a lot of things there, and I think that was one of the reasons why they thought that perhaps I'd be a decent fit as a city attorney. That's what I was hired to do there. And so, having done that for a short period of time, I think it was recognized that there were some other changes that needed to be made in the organization at that point in time, because of the market factors. We kind of gave council a heads up that you may not get a lot of good candidates. And when I say we, there was an interim city manager that served very well, very capably, but was retiring. So he had no interest in the job in a long period of time. Jim Crumley was his name. You probably know Jim. So we talked to the mayor and some of the council members and told them, your pool is going to come in because of different things that are going on out there. It's probably not going to be that great. So they went out. We hired a recruiter, and they went out and resulted in a pool that wasn't really what they were looking for. Good individuals, a lot of good experience, not what they're looking for. They looked around internally and talked to a few different people and talked to me. And I said, I don't have any. I've never wanted to be a city manager. It wasn't my goal. I'm happy being a city attorney. But they convinced me that maybe it would be a good idea because the city attorney really touches all aspects of the organization. So they get a pretty good overview of what's going on all over the place. And having expressed to the other aspect of city attorneys, they're appointed by council, so they don't work for the city manager on a day-to-day basis. Obviously they do, and as representing them from a legal standpoint, obviously they do, but they really are hired and fired by the council, and that develops a relationship directly with them. So some of the discussions just directly, it was apparent that some changes needed to be made, and Jim expressed that as well. And so we ended up deciding that maybe I could be of assistance. And so that's how I became city manager. And I appreciate their faith in me. That was a leap of faith because, who wants to hire an attorney to do something that's non-attorney? And I think it worked out relatively well. We did a lot of different things. We did change the organization substantially.
Right.
In a lot of different areas, some less visible to the public, and some more. But it really, I think, set the organization in a position now that the next leader who came in can take it and continue progress
with that foundation,
because we're going to continue to grow.
Yeah.
And as we grow, the organization itself needs to progress. And I think they found a very good, capable individual, Darren Gore, who's an engineer by training, ran a very large department in the city, assistant city manager, and I think he stepped in, and I think he recognizes that and is moving that forward.
That's great. I'd be curious your thoughts on this, but I know just hearing how you kind of transitioned into that role of city manager, how it wasn't necessarily something you were seeking out to do. I've found in my career, opportunities that have come to me in that way that I was not seeking. Really, they end up being so much more rewarding, because it I don't know, because you just weren't seeking it out, right? It wasn't this thing that you were just like working for 10 years to get to necessarily. And then all of a sudden, here you are with this opportunity, Well,
I will say from my perspective, and I think we share that, is that, I believe God has a plan for our lives. And if we're open to those and make sure that we're pray about it and see the opportunity as what it is and use the discernment that we have, and relying on individuals who are godly as well, it may not be your plan. It may not be what you expect. But it's something that in the long run works out for the best. Not just for you, but for those you are close to, that you love, and then for other individuals, larger individuals, and maybe even the community if you're fortunate enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Well, let's talk about kind of your journey to there. We've kind of touched on it loosely of, Arizona to Murfreesboro, but, I oftentimes people ask, well, how did you end up here doing this?
Right.
And oftentimes my answer is, well, there's no like correct path.
Right. That's true.
Obviously.
A lot of unexpected things.
And obviously, as we just talked about, the Lord's going to direct that,
Right.
and it may not be how we've laid it out there.
Exactly.
But generally speaking, let's just, talk about your professional journey. You mentioned you're obviously an attorney by trade. So let's just talk a little bit about your, education background,
Right.
then early professional career. How did you get into city government? Was that something you were looking to do? So I'd just love for you to kind of share a little bit about that as well.
Well, as you get a certain age on you, you don't want to go back too far because it gets pretty boring. But I graduated from Arizona State University, which I'll say this year because they're having a great year.
Yeah. Great young coach, by the way.
Yeah.
Really energetic.
It took one of the largest universities in the country, the largest university in the country on some years. It took them forever to really put together a football team that could get as far as they have. So there's really little excuse for that. But finally they're there, so that's good. I graduated from there with a finance degree in business and worked for about 6 years in the mortgage industry and then in the tech industry, data processing, which back then was way different than it is now. And then decided that I worked with, when I was in the mortgage industry, with some lawyers on different things that we had to do, and I found that fascinating, the work that they did. And they were really good individuals, and so I talked to them and thought, well, law school might be on a long term something that's pretty interesting. And I ended up going to Southern Methodist University. I was married at the time.
Okay.
My wife got a job offer, and I got accepted at the same time. Didn't go right away. Fooled around for another 3 years before I went. And was genius enough to work for data processing for savings and loan in the mid-'80s, which, if you remember history, was when savings and loans disappeared. So a genius career
So
move.
that was when it was like, okay, I should probably go to law school.
Yeah, so I called SMU, which had accepted me a few years before that, and I said, can I go? And they said, sure, why not? And so I ended up going there and graduating from there. And then we moved back to Phoenix, and I began private practice, and I practiced for about 10 years. It was fascinating practice. It was litigation, which I had never intended to do, but I was really glad I did it. I represented, not me personally, but our firm represented Class 1 railroads, so Southern Pacific, Union Pacific. So I learned all about railroads and how they work and all that goes on there. And that was very, very interesting and great education, great people with the firm. Ended up taking a position with city there, suburb of Phoenix, Glendale, Arizona.
Yeah.
Just at the time where they were exploding and doing a lot of different things. They were in the midst of building an arena for an NHL team, which was the Arizona Coyotes, that finally have decided that they would relocate somewhere else. And it built the arena. It was part of the team that built the arena there. At the same time, the state began working on a NFL stadium for the Arizona Cardinals right across the street.
Okay.
And so became part of the team that did that. And then we brought in, because spring training is big, the Cactus League in Phoenix is a great economic engine for that area in the spring. And Cactus League was expanding, so we convinced the Dodgers to finally move from Vero Beach with the help of the Chicago White Sox. So we built a joint facility for Chicago White Sox and the LA Dodgers to move them over to the Glendale area. So got to participate in a lot of that, and that was a lot of fun. We built a large convention hotel with a gentleman by the name of John Q. Hammonds, which in the hotel industry is a huge name. He never branded his hotels with his name, but it was a huge name. As a matter of fact, he built the convention center here, the Embassy Suites. It was at John Q. Hammonds. And if you go in there and you go in the Renaissance, which you built in Phoenix, you wouldn't know where you were. It looks exactly the same. And a convention center and an expo hall is part of that, and a TV studio. So we put a lot of stuff in there. So it was a good experience. It was transactionally oriented, which is really what I wanted to do. So I was happy with that. And then did that for 12 years. That was about enough. Had a chance to change, so I did. Joined a large firm, went to market, got to know one of the owners of the hockey team, the eventual owners of the hockey team, because they're in the process of changing. Went to market legal services to him, and he said, "Why don't you just come do it here?"
Yeah.
So I did that for a couple of years, and that was interesting. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
But it was really about a 2-year.
Yeah.
A 2-year position. They got things organized and set by then, and so they needed another skill set than mine. And so I left there, and my wife, we put 2 boys in college. Our boys went to college, one to Texas, Baylor University, and the other one to a small school in Northwest Arkansas, which he didn't end up. He ended up graduating from NPSU.
Okay.
But he went there for a while, and my wife said, "I'm not sure I want to live in Phoenix for the rest of my life. So let's try something different." My family's from Kentucky, from Louisville. I grew up some in Hendersonville and in Memphis.
Yeah.
And this job opportunity came up, and she said, let's take a look at it. And we flew in one September, leaving Phoenix as 114, flew into DNA with the green trees and over the Cumberland River, and got out, and it was beautiful. And she said, "Wow, this is
nice.
This is not bad at all. Maybe we can handle this." And then one thing came to another, and ended up taking the position. At the city.
So you kind of mentioned some projects, when you were with Glendale.
Right.
So let's kind of transition to talk about your time as city manager and some of the things over the past 5-6 years, and even I'm sure some of those include your time as city attorney. So what were some of the key projects that you worked on in that roughly past 9 years in those 2 roles?
Yeah, well, we did, like I said, we did a lot of changes with city organization that was important. Financially, we had, and some people remember this, we had a tax increase on our property taxes. The city had, for a long time, subsisted on property sales. When they did the Great Gateway, they bought a lot of property that was to be developed, and they were able to sell that off over a period of time as it was being developed.
Right.
And that brought income in, but it's one-time income. When you sell property, as you know pretty well,
recurring.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily recur unless you're buying it and then you put something on it and do it. But the city was selling it for other people to do really good things on, which completely a good idea for the city. And that area obviously has turned out extremely well. So it was a great plan. A lot of foresight in the council back then. But it wasn't sustainable because the city was running out of land. You can't keep doing that. We hadn't raised property taxes in like 20 years. And there were large corporations that were paying less in property taxes than they were 20 years before. And it needed to be restructured. And so we had to bite the bullet and take that on. But it really set the city, allowed the city to financially be able to do a lot of the things that it needed to do. It needed to catch up in public safety compensation. And so we were able to do that because it's an extremely competitive area to get good individuals, very competitive. And so we needed to increase that and address some of the other things that needed to be addressed. So that was one thing that we did. The other interesting project that was set the city forward for a lot of years is we sold the electric department to Middle Tennessee Electric. There's a long history of why there are small municipal electric departments, but they're utilities, and utilities exist to serve a large number of people. They have high fixed costs. The more people you have that cover those fixed costs, the cheaper the product that they're producing would be. So that's just a definition of a utility. And we were the small donut hole in a much larger area served by Middle Tennessee. And we were never going to be able to grow and invest like Middle Tennessee Electric could. And it was just apparent. And so there had been discussions for quite some time. When I first came here, there was a discussion about selling it. It went away. Once I got in as city manager, I spoke with Chris Jones, who's an excellent individual and an excellent manager over at Middle Tennessee Electric. And we decided that we would take another look at it and talk to council and see if council was interested. And I think they really saw the vision on what it could be, and we were able to tackle a lot of the concerns that people had. Not everybody's interested. It's one thing you learn in municipal government is there are people that will be unhappy with whatever decision you make.
Really?
Yeah, if you can believe that. But and that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. They have another opinion, and they have every right to express it. And you just want to address those concerns because they do raise a lot of issues that you want to address. So that's it's not a bad thing at all. I'm not criticizing it, but. So we were able to put together that deal. It's about a $300 million deal over a period of time. And what we did was we structured that so that it didn't affect Middle Tennessee Electric and its rates and how it was able to operate, but provided a long-term benefit to the city.
Yeah.
And council decided that what they would like to do is to create a trust. And there was a model for that with the Christie Houston when they sold the hospital to St. Thomas. The Ascension. When they sold it to Ascension, they put that money in a trust and created the Christie Houston Foundation, which has been a wonderful asset to the community. And a great board of directors. And Ann Davis is a very wonderful individual who runs that now and is on our trust board now. So the council created the Community Investment Trust, and so it will take the income from that and both help fund nonprofits that work in the community over the next decades. This could persist forever.
If it's
handled well. Exactly. This is a huge legacy for the benefit of the city, and then help fund some of the city's activities as well. And that will continue to grow because Middle Tennessee will make payments over the next. I lost track how long it's been, maybe 12 or 13 years. 13, 14, So 11 or 12 years, they'll continue to make payments into that, and that will continue to grow. And as we invest it, we've hired an investment manager who's invested very conservatively, but able to invest in things that the city itself couldn't invest in. Cities can't invest in anything that's beyond really treasury notes and those type of things that have a very low return because they're very conservative and very stable, and you want that for public money. But this kind of money can be invested in something that would create a bigger return and be able to last for a lot more years and have a larger benefit for the community. So that's we worked with the comptroller at the state, and they were able to see the vision of that. And there's a couple of models of that, not many, but there was a couple across the state. And so we created the Community Investment Trust, and that was a big thing that happened during the time that I was city manager. So I was glad to be part of that. It was exciting.
That's great.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of times when I feel like just human nature is to look at somebody and see their success and almost in some ways, again, just our flesh can be envious in some ways. And I think I talked about this in the intro episode of oftentimes we don't realize that there were valleys in that success and challenges. And so I would love to hear from your time as city attorney and really a city manager, what were some challenges that you faced during that time, and how did you navigate them? I mean, I think that's, this obviously is about legacy, but a lot of it is talking about, leadership and how we lead and really and grow from those types of things. So I'd love for you to kind of share some challenges from that time and how you navigated them, and also not only what were they and how you navigated them, but who did you lean on for advice to navigate those? Because I think especially as men, oftentimes we can in our flesh say, well, I know all the answers.
Right.
But I think it's also, if I've learned anything over the past 5 years, it's so important to have, people you can go to, especially older, wiser,
right,
and seek out advice. So I know that's kind of a lot, but I think you can handle it.
Well, let's see if I can or not. Well, I will say, to start off, one thing as an attorney, and I've always been a practicing attorney, is that you keep client confidences. So,
right,
not everything am I able to say out. But the good side of it is there's nothing major inside the city that happened that needs to be protected by a huge amount of confidence. We restructured a lot of things within the city and how the city government ran. When I say a lot of things, I mean it adds up to quite a bit. But there were changes as we went through, and changes with individuals,
mm-hmm.
and there were some individuals that were just probably had a better capacity to go and do other things. And
mm-hmm.
I've always told when people that I've had to talk about leaving an organization, or that sometimes it's for the best. Your skill set may be used. You may be mm-hmm. happier someplace else. This looks hard and looks mm-hmm. bad, but it can also be an opportunity for you. And a lot of, you run into them later, and they're like, "Man, you were right. It was not always, but a lot of times." As far as we had the benefit, I think, of there are certain people that can really relate to other people. I will freely admit I'm not the most empathetic person in the world. Lawyers aren't trained to be hugely empathetic, and naturally I may not be the most empathetic person in the world. I try. I recognize that, but there are people that are much more empathetic, and they really understand people mm-hmm. To a different level that I know that I don't have. And so you look for those people and right. who they are and how they can help you. And, we had Assistant City Manager Gary Whitaker as one of those people, mm-hmm. very empathetic, could understand people and really talk to them at a level that, I would have problems doing. And he was able to relate to them differently and stuff. Yeah. And he'd been in the organization for decades and mm-hmm. knew a lot of where the issues were and where the problems right. were. A right. very smart individual from that standpoint. And so he's extremely helpful in doing that. I mentioned Darren Gore, who's now the city manager, mm-hmm. assistant city manager. Excellent skill set on how organizations really work and how they run. Right. His father was a professor. He worked at Nissan as one of the executives there, and as a professor at MTSU and organizational management. And so he grew up with this. He understands all this stuff. Yeah. So he was a really good individual on how we can communicate and structure some things through there, which, as I said, as an attorney, I mean, you communicate, but at a different level. Right. You don't right. communicate everything. You only communicate persuasively, and you try to make your arguments, and that's not always the best when you're trying to run an organization. So right. You need these people out here that can do a better job of that. So there's quite a few. I'd say our council as well. We have really good individuals on our council. Over the years, we've had mm-hmm. some really, really good individuals. Eddie Smotherman is a wonderful person. He was on council for quite a while when I first came on. Rick LaLance, very, very smart. Yeah. Doug Young, just mm-hmm. a gentleman all along. So I'm going to miss a few, but a lot of them are current on there now that are good individuals. They have their own opinions. Right. And that's what makes politics, and that's mm-hmm. You want that diversity of thought right. and how they perceive things. Mm-hmm. When you're the city manager, sometimes that's frustrating because
you have your own opinions.
Well, you have your own opinion. You think, well, look, I'm right. I'm in this every day. We've studied all the data and everything else, and but you step back and you think, okay, well, but the people put them in charge mm-hmm. As a group. And right. as a group, they need to, your job is to help them understand it, and they get to make the decision. And then you move on from there. And they've done a tremendous job. And they've done it cohesively. Yeah. As a group. In Arizona, and I think it's really kind of how things develop over time. In Arizona, everybody's from somewhere else. There's a lot of growth. There's a lot of movement in right. and out. And so they didn't grow up together like mm-hmm. they do here. A lot of times they didn't know each other since they were children. And and so there's a lot more sharp elbows, let's say,
right.
A lot of separate agendas and people that are going about that. And when I came here, it was refreshing because you don't really find that. People would make decisions, they might disagree.
Yeah.
But when the decision's made, they're like, okay, well, generally let's move forward. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So we did have challenges. Like I said, we had to move some individuals. There was time. There were lots of very good arguments on why we shouldn't do certain things, and why we shouldn't raise taxes and why we shouldn't sell the electric department.
Right.
And they created challenges that had to be addressed. As a city, some of the biggest challenges come from the state legislature, to be honest with you. They have a habit, and this is, being from Arizona, the legislatures are very comparable, and they do the same thing here that they did there. And one city will have a problem, and they'll address that problem, and then it affects all the other cities. And it really wasn't a problem. As a matter of fact, it creates more problems. So you're always dealing with that every year with the legislature.
Yeah.
So that's that can be challenging, but we've had some pretty good lobbyists that have great insight into what's going on up there. Yeah. Russ Fair and his group have done a really good job. Really good job with that.
Well, as we kind of wrap up over the next 5 minutes or so here, let's get to now. Your transition from city manager to now special counsel.
Right.
And I know there was kind of some certain projects that were kind of tied to that role, so to speak. So just talk about what you're doing now in that role, and maybe a little bit about each one of those things that you're working on.
Well, we talked a little bit about the trust, and the Community Investment Trust. So we have an investment advisor and we have a board, but you still need an administrator, and someone who puts together the meetings and make sure the bills get paid and communicate with the investment advisor and things like that. So that's one of the roles that I was doing as city manager the best that I could, being a city manager, and could see the need as we transition over the next few years to have that role. So I said that I'll step back and handle that role. We've created the Murfreesboro Sports Authority.
Yeah.
We have athletic facilities that really bring in a lot of people.
Right.
We had more people go out to Siegel Soccer Park this is 2 or 3 months ago, but when we studied it, on the previous 12 months, we had more people that went out there than went to Titans games and Predators games combined. So
I don't think a lot of people realize that.
No, there's a huge amount of people that run through there.
Yeah.
When you go out there, it's a blank slate. People go to the athletic events, and they're not surprised when there's some sponsorships going on out there, and it helps supplement the cost of running that facility because it's youth sports, and you don't make enough off of youth sports. You probably shouldn't make enough off of youth sports to be able to run a facility like that completely, and that's where sponsorships can come in and fill that gap, and so that the taxpayers aren't carrying that burden that advertisers who get a benefit from the sponsorships themselves and the visibility, and they're willing to pay for that, and then some of that can go and offset some of the costs of running those facilities. And we have a few of those. I mean, the Old Fort Golf Course, there's 0 sponsorships any place on there, and when you go play golf, which I gave up a long time ago because it was awful and it was no loss to the sport. When you went to the golf courses, there's sponsorships all over the place. You see them all. And but we have 0 there, and it's a great course, and
absolutely,
that can help offset some of the costs for running that, and still keep it as a municipal facility and well run. So, but they need an administrator to be able to handle all that, and so I've taken on that. The airport and some airport development, because I've been involved in that over a few decades on airport development, and can have some understanding of what that means. And so I've agreed to really help with some of the development that we're planning on and going forward with out at the airport itself. And then we have the opportunity to create a solid waste authority. We went to the legislature. They allowed us to create a solid waste authority to address the issues of solid waste. And that could be a whole nother podcast.
Oh, yeah.
But long and short of it is we have some opportunity to do that, and authority would benefit us. We haven't put the authority together yet. We're still seeing if that's needed or not, and how we go forward and address the needs for that landfill that will close eventually. So if that comes about, we'll help out with that. And then generally just whatever the city kind of needs from that standpoint, I can be a resource and hopefully be available and help. That's the intention in any event.
Well, I know I'm personally glad you're still around in some capacities. I think, I think they recognize too, there's a lot of institutional knowledge after you've been around for almost 10 years. And there's a lot of benefit to that and still being able to lean on you. And I'm sure Darren appreciates that as well as he moved into your role. So kind of wrapping up here, a few kind of quick things, just for those that are listening that are, in a leadership role or hoping to be in a leadership role one day, or maybe in public service, what advice would you give kind of emerging leaders or those aspiring to that, as a leader yourself? What advice would you give them as they are kind of on that path towards leadership?
Well, yeah, and it's a question that probably has a lot of answers because each individual is different,
right,
and their paths are different. But I would say, and I I've had over my career the opportunity to work with a lot of different leaders, community leaders. Didn't mention it. I worked with a lot of different cities when we developed a light rail system in Phoenix, and I was able to. I was fortunate enough to be on the board of that organization, a joint organization. So I worked with a lot of elected officials in different cities in addition to the city I was at. And so you see a lot of wide variety of individuals and how they handle things. And the ones I think that contributed the most and had the largest positive effect going forward from a legacy standpoint are those that were there really for the job that they were in.
Yeah.
And they really put a lot of their efforts in that. They weren't looking for the next position necessarily.
Right.
If it came and that was the opportunity, that was fine with them. They may go on. Some of them said, "This is it. I'm not doing anymore. This is all I'm doing, but I want to do this well." Yeah. But those individuals seem to be the ones that were the most effective in what they were doing, that contributed the most, and probably had the biggest positive impact from a legacy standpoint. Yeah. Is really pay attention to where you're at now. Understanding, like we said in the beginning, we can circle back around, is that even the smallest decisions that you make may have a big impact as you go forward. So it's important to stay focused on what you are now, and if the opportunity comes, then address the opportunity when it comes. But if you're always looking for that opportunity, you're probably missing a few things that you need to do now. Yeah. And in public service, I think that's extremely important, because you aren't dealing with the resources that are your own. Or that are shareholders or something. There's no bottom line, right? And that creates a situation where you really do have to pay attention to what you're doing right now and do it the most effective and efficiently you possibly can, because it isn't your money, it's not shareholders' money, it's the public's money,
right?
But that, if you're looking to be a leader, I think that people will recognize your leadership skills. And not everybody has them, and that's okay, because there's a lot of skills that are really needed for someone who may not be in what's termed a leadership role or a management role. Not everybody's a manager. You can learn some skills, and management and leadership are two different things. Yeah. But not everybody can be a manager. Not everybody is wired to be a really strong leader, but everybody has a skill, contribution that they can make that can really make a difference. And they just need to pay attention and really focus on what they need to do now, and then progress on. And if it's into a leadership role, that's great. You'll probably be a really good leader because you have done the work that you need to do to get there.
That's good. Something you said early on as you were talking about your role as city manager that I picked up on as a leadership quality is, and it made me think of a time when I was in school at Knoxville, as part of a group where Big Jim Haslam is what everybody refers to him as, but Governor Haslam's son or dad, Jim Haslam, who started Pilot. But so he would always come a couple times a semester to talk to our group. And I remember someone asking him one time, kind of about leadership and those qualities. And I've never forgotten, one of the things he talked about was I just surround myself with people who are a lot smarter than me.
Yeah,
and essentially
absolutely.
What he was talking about is what you alluded to when you were talking about kind of reorg and the fact that there are leaders, if you want to call them that, that don't recognize their inabilities or their weaknesses. And so what he was saying is a true leader recognizes that he doesn't know everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that he needs those staff people that you were talking about because they have an expertise and a knowledge base that you don't have.
Exactly.
And so that was something I picked up on when you were talking that I think is really a true leadership quality for individuals to kind of recognize their shortfalls,
I agree completely.
So that they can surround themselves with people, and that makes them a better leader.
Yeah.
And that makes the organization or whatever they're leading in better. So
yeah, I agree completely.
Real
Since
quick,
you mentioned it,
because
I talked about ASU having a good season. The other school to the east,
that's right.
UT is having a great season too. So that's
absolutely.
That's good. You're not even
Absolutely. We could do
today.
a whole podcast on that.
We could do it. We could. They're doing really well.
So our last question here, as we wrap up, kind of one of the things that I plan to ask each guest is, what are you currently reading or doing to further your professional growth and development?
Well, I have the benefit since I've stepped down as city manager and taken another role, not to have to worry so much about professional development other than fulfill my CLE hours. But so fortunately, I have a little more flexibility on it and a little more flexibility to do personal development. And of course, for me personally on the development is, for the last couple of years, my wife and I have done, we did a chronological Bible, reading it from the beginning to the end. The chronological Bible, which adds a lot because it tells it in a form of a story. It's really, really good. And then, World Outreach's Bible every day is a good thing. So number one, you can't do much better than that. But on other reading, I ran across, and I was hesitant a little bit because of it's so much in the news now on a lot of different aspects of it. But there was a novel that I'm into now, about almost halfway. A Paragon is what it's called. APIEIROGON. I'm not sure what that means. A Paragon. It's the title of the book by Colin McCann, but it's an extremely interesting book, and it talks about two fathers, one Palestinian, one Israeli, who've come together to try and talk about the differences that are there. They both lost daughters in what's going on over there in the conflict, and it's been very well written. Caveat is I'm halfway through it. I think it's brilliant and it's very good.
Yeah,
we'll see what the other half is.
Yeah,
maybe it's not as great as I assumed.
Maybe to come back with a note to listeners.
Yeah. Maybe that's not that great, but I will tell you that so far it's been really good. It was highly recommended, and I really enjoyed it. And it's timely on what's going on now.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously if I were to talk about the issues that are over there, alliances fall strongly with Israel, but I think the perspective is always good to have. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, Craig, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Insights,
it's always good to see you.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
so
it was.
Thanks again.
Appreciate it, Matt.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Legacy Builders with Matt Herriman. Be sure to go like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and we would just love it if you left us a 5-star review as well. We'll see you next time.